Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're connecting from. I'm Sean Matson with the Alliance of Bioversity International and CIAT, CIAT being the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. Today I'm with our Director General, Juan Lucas Restrepo, and Andy Jarvis, who is our Associate Director General
Hello.
for Research, Strategy, and Innovation. And today we're going to talk a little bit about what everybody's talking about, COVID and our response to that, and how that's playing out with the food system, and what we're working on as an alliance, and where we're going from here. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Juan Lucas, what are we seeing happen in the food system? Is there a reason for us to be concerned about what's happening right now?
Hello, Sean, and hello, everybody. I am very pleased to be able to have this conversation that hopefully it's not between us three, but involves a lot of people across the globe that can have some ideas, and maybe we have some answers. Maybe we just commit to keep working on the ones we don't. If we look at 2000, this food crisis that was created in 2007 and 2008, and that was really big. People are kind of saying, no, this crisis is not so big. It's not impacting the food system as much, given we're not seeing all these big price spikes that created a lot of shortages, especially in poor countries. And we remember watching TV all these riots and all these difficulties. This is a really different crisis. To me, it may be even deeper, because the past time, the one in 2008, once the global production recovered, international trade began again, things went pretty much back to where we were. In this case, the disruption is at a much deeper level that we are only understanding now. As the disruptions, we're just seeing these disruptions. We're seeing that producers are not finding a market, for example, in many parts of the world, that they are having doubts on whether they are going to plant for a next season. They don't know if they will get labor, workers to help them with the harvest. So, we got farmers across the globe with a lot of doubts. We have a lot of farmers not being able to sell their crops. We're seeing a lot of food going to waste. There is, only in the US, we are expecting that food waste this year will jump from 30% to 40%. So all of these together will mean a huge impact, not necessarily global prices of a few commodities, but what people have on their plates. And of course, there is the other side of the many consumers without income at this moment, especially the poorest, that are having the opportunity to feed themselves. And this is creating, again, a gap in people going hungry. So it's really complex. And I think this is also a fantastic opportunity to start discussing about it and to understand what we're doing, for example, with our scientific hats, not only as our alliance, but as our family of CGIAR centers, where collective action, coordination in the response is going to be super critical.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I know
I mean,
we're seeing. Go ahead, Andy.
if
Yeah.
I can just compliment, I mean, up till now, there was an interesting article came out in The Economist, kind of talking about that the food system has stood up to the crisis so far. And it makes some very good points about these, as Juan Lucas says, prices haven't spiked so high, and generally speaking, many people continue to be able to source food in their supermarkets. But there's some really important nuance in how the food system works. And one thing is there's huge lags. And across the world, February, March, April is planting time in so many countries. And so you feel there's big lags in the food system. You'll feel some of those impacts further down the line. Maybe now economies are opening up, but at some critical times they were closed. Quarantine, lockdown was affecting labor. It was affecting the ability to plant. And then the other thing is 4/5 of the food that we consume globally comes from imported goods, right? And so countries have quite a lot of storage in place in some countries. They've been using that up, but we're going to start seeing those import challenges impact on the food system. And the other thing is the poor consumers, right? The UN is predicting 1.7% to 3.4% of the global population will have acute food shortages now, and so it's the poorest households that are going to get hit hardest by this. Tiny increases in price have fundamental impacts on their household budget.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Andy, let me complement.
If you're watching the news,
just
go ahead.
For a second. No. What I think, just following Andy, it's clear now that people are eating less because markets are not finding, consumers are not meeting, producers, and because there is a lot of food going to waste, so there is less consumption. That's a given already, but the consumption is changing or has changed dramatically. People, the school cafeterias are not open anymore. Restaurants are closed. Food fast chains are changing. So, and we still don't know exactly what people are eating. But my guess is that, in terms of the quality of the diet, in terms of the micronutrients, calories, vitamins, etc., probably it's not as balanced as it was before. And before it was already pretty bad.
Yeah, exactly. And, if you're following the news on these different things, I haven't seen food this much being making so much in the way of headlines. You're seeing harvests go to waste, especially in the United States and in Europe. Many reasons for that. And at the same time, you're having these lineups for food banks, which you've never seen before. And these are in high-income countries. So imagine what the situation's like in some low-income nations where we work. So that's something that really that we're keeping an eye on here at the Alliance, and we'll have a lot more information about that. Just one quick housekeeping note I forgot about earlier. This is being recorded. We will have a version of this online with subtitles in the future for all of our listeners here in Latin America who would like to see it in Spanish. So Andy, given the situation that we're in, looking at the areas where we work, which are spread out across the global south, where there's a lot of concern, there's been a bit of a lag in terms of the pandemic's hit in many of the regions, but it looks like it's ramping up, unfortunately. From a research perspective and from the work that we're doing, how are we responding? What is the Alliance doing in terms of responding from the science side to this global crisis?
I mean, first and foremost, there's an excellent response for CGIAR wide on this COVID, and there's been a very detailed analysis of what we're doing and how that contributes to the response and also the recovery, most importantly. And so that's been a kind of guiding light in terms of what goes on. In terms of our contribution to this, it's fascinating because our mission is around the transformation of a food system. We kind of have our strategy centers around the food system not being sustainable enough, not delivering nutrition effectively, and not being just, equity issues in the food system. And so that, our mission is about the transformation of the food system, and we're seeing the food system transform before our eyes, right? And so this, from a research perspective, is a fascinating, there's kind of an evolving narrative that is fascinating to actually understand, and I think is a huge opportunity for us to, many of the things that were broken and that we were worried about in the food system, we have a new opportunity now to try and fix them as we navigate through this crisis and pivot towards recovery. And so we've been paying massive amounts of attention really to what's going on. We've structured our kind of efforts around three things. One is understanding impacts, right? We watch, in the news, you are being bombarded by information and data on the health side of things. Many people complain about it, but if you come from the agriculture side, you're salivating at the quality of real-time health information that is actually being produced. If we had that in agriculture and food security, we'd be in a whole different state of much better state than we are in right now. And so one thing I think is really critical is getting good data. We need real-time dynamic data of what is happening. So we have a big piece of our work has been looking at that. We're looking at monitoring the impacts, understanding, well, what is happening to poor consumers? How is their consumption pattern changing? What's happening? Moving all the way back on the food system to production. Are farmers able to access seed? Are they planting? Do they have access to labor? And so we're really trying to understand across our networks, which is where we see our biggest asset, using our networks to capture information. So just a couple of examples of what we're doing. One thing that's been very, very interesting is Wi-Fi. We were in the right place at the right time with Wi-Fi networks in markets. And so in the wet markets and the fresh fruit and vegetable markets of Hanoi, we had free Wi-Fi being provided, and we were using it to capture information about what people were buying, what the price is like. And so we've been using that network right now to understand in Hanoi exactly how this food system is shifting. And so we have a baseline from before COVID, we're monitoring it during, and now as Hanoi opens up, we're being able to see how opening up of the economy is changing again, purchasing patterns, consumption patterns, and prices. So we're really capturing great data there on markets. We've been moving over the continent. We've been looking in rice, for example. In Latin America, we've been looking from production through to trade, through to prices, systematically across this commodity of what's going on. And it's actually one of the products that's highlighted as seeing the highest rise in prices, which is confirmed in both markets, but also the industry and the actors in the rice sector are saying that this is a significant shift in their operation. And we're seeing there on the rice side of things in Latin America, a lot of challenges on the production side, and this is why I say there's a lag in the food system. We could see the impacts of that a couple of months down the line. But we're also seeing new opportunities in rice. The higher prices means is better for producers, but then aggregation points and labor are some of the pain points that they're seeing. So we're collecting data systematically everywhere from markets and consumers through to commodities. Some of the results that we're getting are pretty worrying. And so one of the things that most concern that we've got so far from our efforts, we're using a 5Q approach, which is a kind of rapid survey method for capturing this information. And we've been surveying slum dwellers and low-income consumers in Nairobi. And it's pretty harrowing, some of the numbers coming out. 93% of people living in slums are reporting a reduction in their consumption of fresh fruit and vegetables. 86% saying it's because of higher prices and lower income, essentially. So you're seeing a pending kind of food shortage disaster in the slums of Nairobi. So that's been our efforts around monitoring impact, and that's been a strong push that we've been making. Just getting data. It's very hard to manage the crisis without knowing what's happening, and I think there's a lot of narratives and anecdotes out there. What we need is using networks to get solid data to be able to act upon that. The second area we've been working on is improving and accelerating our response. Juan Lucas, yeah.
But no, just to stress your point, as this is absolutely important. The faster we have this information about what's happening down there, what's happening in the real markets, where are these mismatches between production and consumption, what's happening, as you say, with the Kenyan consumers that are where the results are clearly showing that it's not only less consumption, but the quality, the nutritional quality of what they are eating is much lower, and that what that may mean in the future in terms of health, for example, just understanding those dynamics is I think, what we need to be focusing on right now. And then, of course, starting to think about the response and the recovery. And that's where, and I think you were taking us there, where we need to start thinking, okay, what kind of food system or what can we do so we don't go exactly back to the current situation that had a number of challenges in terms of environmental limits, etc. So the response is going to be something absolutely critical, and we see from the Alliance this as an opportunity for the food system to shape it somewhat into a more nutritional and environmentally sound food system that, of course, provides more opportunities for actors along the value chain, especially farmers. So it's great to talk a little bit about recovery in this conversation as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so, I mean, one of the lessons that we're seeing is the impacts and the responses need to be highly contextualized, right? So every country in reality, I'm just looking at some of the comments, we're hearing what's going on in Uganda, in Kenya, in Rwanda. We've heard about some of the impacts there in the Philippines. So many of these impacts are highly contextualized, and so our response also needs to be based and rooted on those contexts, on the realities in these countries. And so something that I've found fascinating is differences. We're seeing kind of, for example, consumer consumption surveys saying that the poor and middle-income consumers in Latin America actually see the health side of things as being really important. COVID has made them kind of reflect a little bit about their nutrition and their health, and as a result, changing their consumption patterns to eat more fresh fruit and vegetables. So we have higher willingness to eat these in some countries, whereas in other countries, like in Nairobi, we're seeing reductions in consumption. And so highly contextualized, and any response needs to be grounded in the country. Something that one commonality across this is in terms of the response and accelerating our response to the crisis has been use of digital platforms. And so many digital platforms are looking at bringing consumers closer to producers. And so with Costa Rica, with the government in Costa Rica, we've been working on in partnership with others on apps that facilitate that deal making, so that we're getting more direct market systems. We've also been looking at again in Nairobi, as a response to this issue of some of the very poor consumers and the fresh food and vegetable issue, using digital platforms to provide food baskets to those consumers. And I think it's critical that organizations like the Alliance and like the CGIAR is involved in these response mechanisms, because as Juan Lucas says, this gives us the opportunity to steer the food system in the right direction in the recovery. Be a knowledge partner, a technical support partner. That means that this is not just a kind of short-term kind of humanitarian support, but that we very quickly pivot and we strategically plan this out as a recovery that is on a more sustainable pathway.
Yeah, if I could just interrupt for a second. It's fascinating work. One thing that comes to my mind here is that because the Alliance, CGR, Big Data, the various areas have been working so long to set up these real-time response systems in terms of being able to collect data, it's very interesting how quickly they're being adapted to provide information on this current situation. So the sort of the capacity that we've been installing has been able to adapt to these new needs quite quickly, and it's fascinating to see how agile that sort of area has been. So that's great, and we're don't want to get too much stuff away, but we've got some really cool stories coming up in the next few weeks that are going to go into more of the data that we've been collecting along those sorts of lines. Very quickly, we've just got a couple comments that have been coming in one from the Uganda and one from the Philippines. Rose from Uganda saying, yeah, that this discussion is much related to what is happening on the ground there. There's reduced food consumption for foodstuffs than usual, higher prices, and challenges with actually transporting foodstuffs from farmers to where they're consumed, right? Over in the Philippines, it says here, okay, restaurants and hotels are not operating. That's pretty much the case everywhere. So this is meaning that a lot of the raw materials that farmers provide are not actually being able to go to their usual customers, right? So there's a lot of work that's being done along those sorts of lines as well. And yeah, so that was good for a couple of comments there. Let's see here. Juan Lucas, I don't know if you had anything to add to what Andy just said, or if you would like me to go on to the next question that talks a little bit about how the alliance itself has sort of been affected by the current situation. And because I'm sure a lot of our viewers are interested in what is it, how have we adapted as an organization to this?
Okay, so a couple of things just complementing the information. Things are happening at the local, at the landscape levels, and the countries, governments, of course, what they care about nowadays is a local response. And what we will see in the coming months and years are recovery efforts focused at a national and even subnational basis. That's one thing. But then we need to make sure that we maintain a global dialogue, that countries, the G20, etc., agree on common frameworks, so there is enough coordination, so trade flows, so knowledge is used for decision making. So this crisis relates to, for example, the negotiation on the post-2020 Convention on Biological Diversity Framework, or what governments are discussing in the climate summits, for example. So it's going to be super important that, of course, governments are asked to look, and focus on their people, of course, but how to make sure we are part of that global dialogue, and that's part of what we feel is our mandate. Understand from all of these situations how we can use that information to create a case also at the global level. Now, on the alliance, well, it's been a big challenge because we signed an agreement that Bioversity International and CIAT, it was an agreement, a marriage agreement, and this year was supposed to be very calm, building our house, changing, integrating teams, etc. And then we got COVID, and for everybody, it was very difficult for us to react, first to protect our staff and make sure they were safe, but also, as Andy said, to make sure while protecting our staff, we could still go to the field with the high protection, plan some of the experiments, etc., so we didn't lose 13, 16 months of our work. So we're doing a lot of change on top of change. We are still aiming very high at ending the year with a fully integrated alliance that delivers impact at scale, but at the same time, changing and adapting with the current scenario. I see two things that COVID has helped us with. There is sometimes good in the bad, and one has been, and maybe Andy can talk a little bit about this, bringing two scientific communities that have been working for decades, building their own culture, their own way of doing things together, integrating two teams of scientists. That's very difficult. Scientists are not the easiest people to deal with. So they say. I like them very, very much. But how is COVID helping to bring these two scientific communities from these two systems together? I think it's super interesting, and maybe Andy can share some of this with us.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, as an institution, I mean, we're affected as well, and the global news has been talking a lot about health heroes, but we have our heroes as well within our institution, and they're the people that have been out there from even during early lockdown. We had a skeletal crew keeping, for example, a gene bank alive, so that we have the plant material that we need for a resilient and resilient and sustainable recovery from this. So we've been keeping the gene banks materials alive, and we've been working very hard to avoid losing a cropping cycle, right? So in crop improvement, if we if we lose 1 year, for example, one cropping planting date, we could lose a whole year of kind of research in a sense. We fall back one year behind, and so we've been slowly ramping up our efforts in the field, and so we have our heroes that have kept that moving and kept that going, and we're very appreciative of them. You know, we're in 4 months now of this formal alliance, and I must admit, I don't think any of us expected these first 4 months quite to be like this. But I think, you know, in adversity, you find a lot of creativity, innovation, and great spirit to solve problems. And so I actually think this is impacted quite. It's impacted very negatively a lot of things. But in terms of bringing teams around problems, you know, I think the scientific community that we work with has really pulled together, not just within the alliance, but across the CGIAR, to look at what is our contribution to support the recovery from this. So that's been a fascinating institutional process that we've been looking through.
Yeah, we are. I sometimes, get into Andy's conversations with the scientists, and it's amazing to see how, a few hundred of scientists across the globe have a very fruitful dialogue, understanding how we can react in the short term and how we validate our strategy for the recovery. So this is usually very difficult when you have scientists in the field and people such as Andy on a plane going to conferences and being, following projects across the globe. I've been, very fortunate that in a big change moment, I can reach out to Andy. He's home every day. He's very easy to find, as well as other members of my senior management. And this is also allowing us to think, and give more time to strategic thinking and making sure we position ourselves in a better manner for what's coming, which of course is going to be this post-COVID world that's going to be super challenging, and we are giving a lot of thought and using a lot of our neurons to foresee how to act in the best manner possible. Not only as an alliance, we're very small. We're a few hundred scientists, 30 countries. We need to think how to link with our CGIAR members, other system units, universities, national innovation systems, etc. So it's a lot of thinking to act not only better as an alliance, but also to link better and to partner better.
I think everyone is looking to, this recovery needs to be much more sustainable, much more resilient. And, that starts with the institution. I think we've learned to work much better virtually, and I think that's something the whole world is learning right now. And so hopefully, in the way we go about our work should be much more sustainable, but also the way that these food systems rebound and reset and reform, essentially. I have high hopes that it will be much more sustainable. And that's where we need the international donor community, the national governments, regional bodies, international bodies to be incentivizing a recovery which is built on the principles not of rapid economic recovery, but on sustainable recovery. And I think that shift in the paradigm I can see happening in so many people, and it's absolutely critical that we put the path towards that out, lay it out clear for the world.
Great. We're getting an awful lot of questions in here, which is great. A lot of participation. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to get to everything here. But I've got one question here from Vivian Bernal. She says, do you think that because of the crisis, people that previously didn't grow their own food are going to start new food-related projects for their own consumption in cities and in rural areas.
Absolutely, yeah. Juan Lucas, you can show your lettuces on the patio. I have mine out there as well too.
Yeah, Andy and I have a lettuce challenge. I have a small terrace in downtown Rome. He has a garden in Cali, Colombia. My lettuces are doing much better than his, but he's growing a larger diversity of crops. So he's beating me also in some other elements. People are, of course, reacting, and this involves a lot of emotions. How can I make sure I find food in the coming months, years, etc.? So we see a lot of people, and peri-urban agriculture, etc., growing, and this might stay for a while. But it's gonna. But what I think may happen is people understanding better what is the system and what's the value chain and what's in the process and the pathways of food going to their plates, where food is coming from, what it means for the producer, what it means for their health. And I'm pretty confident, and this is a positive effect of this, that we're going to get a much more conscious consumer. And this is an amazing opportunity, and we're hearing discussions at different levels. For example, the European Union is saying our recovery is going to be under a Green Deal, and they are discussing about regenerative agriculture and agroecological principles, etc. So, we are seeing room not only for people to grow more of their own food, but for value chains and food system transformation in a significant way in the coming months and years.
Great. We have a couple questions related to what's happening actually on the ground in the field, in the fields across the globe. One thing that we do, obviously, with a lot of the work is have a very close contact with growers associations, local extension workers, local governments. Obviously, that's been impacted by the situation. So what are we doing to maintain that connection and really sort of have that presence there virtually or in another way to help a lot of these ongoing projects that are there and maintain that these really important partnerships are happening. And as you mentioned earlier, Andy, just have a real sort of finger on the pulse of what's actually happening out in the fields with the smallholder farmers.
Well, I mean, maybe I can start on this one. I mean, I think it's critical that the digital tools are playing an absolutely critical role right now, and so we're learning, I think, as research organizations, but also I think the whole sector in the production in every respect is seeing the opportunity now in this kind of lockdown quarantine world where the digital platforms can provide. So you still need you can't text a tomato, as I once said, but you still need fields and you still need people kind of working those fields. But so many of the services that go on in agriculture can be provided much more effectively through digital tools, market systems, but also extension, giving farmers information through extension. We've been working for a long time, many years now, on climate services, giving farmers information on their climate services. In Central America, we've been using our digital platforms to survey farmers, understand what's going on there and what are some of their bottlenecks and barriers right now. And then as a result of that, either alerting the relevant authorities or providing information services to fill the knowledge gaps that they have. And so I think the one big aspect of this, we need to double down and push on digital extension systems so that farmers have access to real-time information. They're providing the food system and the actors and research and consumers with better information about what's going on in the field, but also they're receiving actionable information to better manage their crops. So I think digital platforms are transformational right now and absolutely critical, and we need to piggyback off this crisis to double down on their implementation more across the food system.
Well, just to share, we've been more than 2 months with our headquarters building of the Alliance in Rome building closed. That's around 120, 130 people working from their homes. And things are working so far. Of course, we need to meet, we need to interact, we need to open those facilities as much as possible, but I'm pretty sure we're not going to return to business as usual as, teleworking, the digital revolution is moving at an even greater pace through this crisis. So my thinking there is that we cannot allow producers, farmers to be left out of this. Because that would basically create an even greater divide between the urban and the rural, and create even larger inequality. So we need to rely on those tools, and we need to be very pragmatic. If a farmer has a great access, 4G, 5G, etc., great. But a very simple telephone with a black and white normal screen that was amazing 20 years ago, but that millions still use. That's good enough. That's good enough if we manage the agronomists, if we manage to connect the knowledge providers with the users, knowledge and demand in a new way of interacting. So digital for sure will change extension systems and how farmers relate to each other, to markets, to service providers, etc. We're going to be requiring a lot to work a lot on that, especially to avoid particular private interest to develop this just for marketing purposes, but that we really protect the global domain and these services, ensuring honest brokers are part of these knowledge exchange conversations.
And there's a great comment there from Olafemi about the kind of inclusion issue in digital platforms, and so that's at the core of what we're trying to do. Is this digital revolution needs to be inclusive, not widen the gap, but be inclusive and designed for those farmers who are marginalized. That means making sure that the technology is available, they have service, but also they have the capacity, and the tools in the digital platforms we create are easy to use for even low literacy levels in digital platforms.
Great. And one comment that came from India here that was very interesting.
Sean, something very super important. It has to do with gender equality.
Absolutely.
Digital illiteracy in women in the rural sector is much larger than men's. So that's already a huge gap that we need to bridge. So there is also a number of gender and equality concerns, and this is also the case for youth. Digital is a way to bring back youth into farming, making it exciting, making it a knowledge a challenge for them, so they see exciting lives for them in producing food to feed humanity.
Absolutely. So what I wanted to mention there, and this has been something that's been making some headlines as well, is we had a comment from India as a result of a large amount of very sudden unemployment in cities. People are migrating back to the rural areas that they're from and taking up farming again. How does that sort of maybe perhaps change the dynamic of some of the areas that we're focused on? Because one of the things that comes up a lot is that, well, there just aren't enough people to work in the fields. I can expect that maybe many have come back after many years of being in the city, and they're going to see some things that have changed, some things are different. The digital inclusion, for example, obviously there's a big digital divide there that we're still working on closing. So how does just the simple fact that there are more people now turning back to agriculture, how does that sort of change things for what we're doing?
maybe I can go first, take that. I mean, every single variable is changing. This is this transformation of the food system before our eyes. We're seeing every single variable out there, shifting, and that has all sorts of these knock-on effects. I mean, I think there's a few comments there talking about youth. Many of the people leaving these cities, disenfranchised youth that left rural areas to go to cities, and maybe now going back in some areas. And so I mean, first of all, we have very poor data on really numbers and expectations of these people, but also it'll have impacts in the very short term now, but I think really what we need to be keeping our eye on is in the medium and long term in this recovery phase. What implications does that have? How do we use that to generate sustainable, resilient recovery? And it's not necessarily a good thing to have a lot of people in rural areas unemployed. That's the reason why a lot of this migration to the cities started in the first place. So it's something to watch. Again, I firmly believe that we need youth in agriculture, and we can attract youth in agriculture by making it much more attractive as a business. See it not as a kind of sector that is the last thing you do when you've got nothing better to do, but rather this is an opportunity and a business where you can get good prices, you can make a decent living, have a decent livelihood, and I think there's lots of approaches and tools that we can use, to cement that. But everything's changing right now, and I think the first thing is we need to really understand how they're changing, and then design appropriate response mechanisms to it.
Yes, it's difficult to foresee what will happen, but at the end, as urban economies recover and some of these activities, start to ramp up again, we might be seeing, people, driven to those opportunities and going back to urban areas. What this may provide is an opportunity for a rebalance, in rural areas, and this is very specific to different territories, where there is room for more people to have a decent living, out of agriculture. Well, we need to make a huge effort for those people to stay, but that's not going to be a huge trend, just an opportunity. I'm from Colombia, and the violence drew many people out of the fields that had to leave, were displaced and had to move into urban slums. And there was land grabbing. So there is a lot of land tenure issues, etc., that are parallel to this discussion and need to be resolved by countries if they want to provide more opportunity to farmers, and not just have a subsistence farmer or a family depending on a few hundred square meters, because there's not a lot of they're going to be able to get for a decent livelihood out of that.
And just talking to that, there's a great question there from Godfroy about the recovery needed to be sustainable, and there was another comment asking about whether it's kind of humanitarian aid or long term. I think we need to be making sure that we don't just blindly go in with humanitarian aid, but rather put a very coherent set of programs and strategies and policies in place on a global, regional, national, subnational level that cements a recovery that is much more resilient and sustainable. And I think we need to fix some of the pain points that we know exist in the food system, and its access to finance is one. I think there's a big opportunity for sustainable finance to play a very critical role in providing the right incentives, credit, finance for some of the changes in the food system to happen. And so there's a whole range of things that we can do, but we really need to be thinking, I think, long term and lining up anything we do now with that long term vision. We can't let this reset that we have, this opportunity, go. We lost it in 2008 to a certain extent, and I think this time we have a real opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think the
think
best
that's.
thing countries can do right now,
Go ahead.
yeah, no, the best reaction of countries at present is to, as much as they can, to give subsidies to the poorest to just to buy food. And this is, absolutely and clearly the best thing that can be done. It's really different when a government and municipality, etc., has to decide about the recovery pathways and has to decide what to finance with a very low, a small amount of resources that will be available. And this is where these recovery pathways need to be very well looked at, as there are a lot of trade-offs. Are we going to give government support, public funds, just to go back to the status quo before the crisis? Or are we going to use this crisis to identify pathways, recovery pathways, that might help the system, the food system, find a better equilibrium in this nexus of, agriculture meeting with the environmental boundaries, and again, thinking about nutrition, what is in your plate. If a consumer starts to understand that plate of food might define health issues such as diabetes, for example, non-communicable diseases, and what the public sector has to pay for those big health problems, maybe the resources are there to provide for a much more nutritious plate of food looking forward.
Yeah, and there's a great comment there from Irene. The decisions are being made as we speak, and I'm afraid many of those decisions are not taking into account sustainability, resilience. I think that's where everyone on this Facebook Live, but you need to be screaming out to governments and advocating that we take advantage of that. We push for sustainable recovery, and use a lot, don't forget the climate crisis, don't forget all of the nutrition crises that we have, and so on. So use those and we recover in a much better way.
Yes, exactly. And on that note, let people know that we're talking about this, share the link to this conversation. I think we can go on a little bit longer. We have a few more minutes here and a bunch more questions. Was there anything else, Juan Lucas or Andy, that you guys wanted to mention right now before I looked at a couple of the questions that we hadn't had a chance to get to yet? And again, I'm sorry we won't be able to get to everything, but the participation's been great here.
No, go for it. I think good for some questions.
I think one very important element that we can discuss maybe in another conversation has to do with seeds. And because the solution for a better and more diverse and healthier plate of food will have to do in a significant way with access to seed from the farmers, with access to a much larger variety of seeds than what is available right now. And this means that we need to safeguard dearly our agrobiodiversity, whether it's in the wild or in gene banks, etc. But we need to look at how countries change their regulations, adopt farmers' rights, and design sui generis registration systems for seeds, so we have the possibility of marketing, sharing, selling, buying, etc. at a local level, a much larger portfolio of seeds. That's a critical part of the solution. It's very complex, but it's something we need to talk about as loud as possible in this transition, because I am absolutely convinced it's part of the solution.
Great. So there's a couple things here. I mean, on one hand, comparing this situation in 2008, prices and some of the things that drove prices sky high are not there. We've seen some drops. We've seen some prices rise. It's still a little bit out, hard to exactly predict what is going to happen. But if you look at some of the FAO statistics on regional prices, you're seeing certain things are going up in price in different places. In Colombia, rice is increasing. Grains and beans are going up in parts of Central America. I don't have everything here at this moment, but I can add this in a bit. And that goes to one of our questions from that we had here is can low and middle income countries still expect to have, relatively affordable and cheap imports of the foodstuffs that they import. One positive thing that we've seen is that, in 2008 there was a lot of border closing, there were a lot of restrictions on exporting food. We haven't seen that yet. But I was wondering if you could provide some maybe some insight on what you think will go forward there. And as you mentioned earlier, even just a small increase in price can have a major impact on many people.
Well, we are seeing a lot of multilateral organizations, coalitions, experts calling the G20 and national governments, etc., to be really careful restricting international trade. And if we look at the volume of stocks, etc., I'm pretty confident the stocks are good enough to to help us transition. So in terms of the commodities, the main groups in terms of our caloric intake, if countries behave, if countries don't start becoming crazy and enacting restrictions, I think we will be pretty safe. And as I said again, I think the crisis is it's deeper. It's on fruits, vegetables, and other really important foods, and it's going to be very critical on small and medium enterprising, small processors. That's where I see we're going to see a lot of difficulties. Let me, Sean, become the interviewer for a second, because Andy, he's been working for a long time in climate change. So maybe something, Andy, relating what's happening with COVID. Is climate change still hot in the agenda? Is the climate crisis number one, or is this going to change in terms of the priorities in the public dialogue? What do you see?
I mean, I'm in two minds on that. I mean, I think on the one hand, many people are linking the current crisis with with it being a much more general issue of sustainability, and linking it to how, I think people have realized how fragile their livelihoods are, their well-being is in the current system that we have. And so that is bringing more attention, I think, and importance to these kinds of issues, and climate change being, in my opinion, one of the issue of the 21st century that we need to be looking at. We're seeing, because of these changing patterns, people flying less, transport going down, massive shifts in energy use. We are going to see a little blip and a reduction in the greenhouse gas emissions that I think sends a positive signal. And I think a lot of people have realized that you can do certain activities without such a huge environmental footprint. I think we're learning to be more efficient on that sense. My biggest fear is that the recovery focuses on economic prosperity, just about economic growth, and we lose so much that was gained in terms of the incentive mechanisms in policy for green growth and for climate mitigation and resilience building. And so I think that needs to be absolutely intertwined into the policies and the big kind of programs that governments put out to recover from this crisis. And so I worry, but I also think there's room for hope. And as I say, I think we need to be screaming out that the solution to this is green, sustainable growth.
Absolutely, and I think we're seeing some strong messages from different leaders around the world about the idea that building back better is kind of the theme that's often being used, and because there is a terrible humanitarian crisis happening at this moment with regards to the pandemic, but on the other hand, there's very important recovery that needs to happen. And the discussion is happening, I think, and I think this was probably different from 2008, is that we are hearing some very positive things from a number of leaders around the world saying, this opportunity to build back our economies, we can do it greener, we can do it better, we can be more inclusive, we can think more about the environment. But it's also very important to avoid that temptation to go back to some of the business as usual things, which were behind driving inequality and then driving the climate crisis, of course. I think we're pretty close to wrapping up here. I don't know if you wanted to either of you have a couple of last quick comments before I close out with just some housekeeping notes.
No, just to complement Sean, we tend to talk a lot about the decisions in the public sector of governments, but the driver of this is the private sector. And we are seeing very strong signals in the World Economic Forum, in Unilever, Danone, PepsiCo, all of the big players in the food industry are, even before the crisis, were saying, okay, our business model is starting to have issues, and they're becoming much more conscious on sustainability. So hopefully in this private-public dialogue, we find these recovery pathways that definitely need to be more greener, sustainable, and that can help accommodate food systems within current planetary boundaries.
Yeah, absolutely. And just from closing from me, I just to reiterate, I think the importance of from ourselves as an institution, our networks and our partnerships are critical in everything from, as I say, we're framing kind of around this kind of better response right now, but that very much linked up to a more sustainable recovery. And so it's critical that we're taking good data, that we're using our partners, working through that partner network to understand what is going on. Everything is changing. So in the ag sector, we need better information on what's changing, so that the policies that we put in place, the investments that we make are far smarter and put us on the right trajectory.
Great. Juan Lucas joining us from Rome. Thank you so much. Andy joining us from Cali, Colombia. Great. I'd like to thank everybody who joined us. We have a lot of questions we didn't get to, but on that note, some of the questions were about our gene banks and the other work that we're doing. So this is our first session. It won't be our last, and our next one will be probably next week, and we'll talk specifically about what we're doing in our gene banks in Colombia and in Belgium. So we'll invite you back to that. As for more updates on the things that we have been doing, and many of the questions that have been asked will be answered in upcoming things that we will have on our websites and on social media channels. So please stay tuned, and we'll do this again. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Have a good day, evening, night from wherever you're joining us, and thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I enjoyed it. So thanks for being with us, and let's please keep in touch with our alliance.